is celebrated. St. Patrick's Day is celebrated in many countries around the world. It was a big deal when I was in New Zealand. In fact, I wrote this service for a worship service I did on March 13th, 2011 in the Auckland Unitarian Church. St. Patrick's Day will soon be here, and with it, the drinking and the toasts, the corned beef and cabbage, the hurrahs and the parades. For some, it also means the wearing of the green. For many, this color connotes Ireland's rolling hills and valleys. But what is known as the wearing of the green refers to a song from the 19th century in which green is identified as a symbol of sympathy for Irish independence and as a reminder of St. Patrick himself. The two have become intertwined over the centuries, which might surprise the saint if he were alive to witness the fuss and hear all the noise on his feast day. In fact, the raucous holiday aspect of this occasion might actually horrify him. In Ireland, in fact, I've asked you how many of you are from Irish descent. In Ireland, St. Patrick's Day was until very recently a holy day, a day of prayer and abnegation, a day of remembrance of a man who changed the religious spirit of a vibrant and stormy culture. Born neither in Ireland nor of Irish descent, born neither Patrick nor a saint, this 5th century British man's history reveals suffering and salvation. From slavery to sainthood, his was a very complex life. Patricius, as he was later known, was born somewhere along the west coast of Great Britain. According to his autobiography, and he wrote one called the Confessio, he was captured by raiders along with thousands of other people and sold into slavery in Ireland, a wild land to the west. Some of you may know, some of you may not, that Dublin had the largest slave market in Western Europe at the time. By his own account, he came from a Christian family, although he was not religious as a child. While a slave, his Christian faith grew and comforted him. Surrounded as he was by Celts, he learned their language and the customs of his master, a Druid high priest. In one account, he is described as serving the priest for 6 years as a shepherd in desolate conditions high in the hills. As a mystic, the boy grew into a man who dreamed. The first memorable dream led him to escape, walking 200 miles south through Ireland to County Wexford, where he found a boat and crossed the sea. By that time, he was 22 years old. Upon arriving in England, he was seized and returned to slavery. Eventually, he escaped once more and made his way to Europe, how I assume by boat, where he studied Christianity at the Lorraine Monastery in France. After living again in England for a time, he had another dream. Now, mind you, he's crossing back and forth, and this is in the 5th century. In the next dream, he heard voices begging him to return to Ireland. Instead, he made his way to a monastery at Auxerre in France, where he lived for several years and adopted the Latin name of Patricius. Padraig is the old Irish version of this name, and I'm probably mispronouncing it. I've never heard anyone say it out loud. Does anyone here know?
You said it right.
I did?
Yes.
Thank you. In time, it was decided that he be sent to Ireland. To expedite his work, he was named a bishop by Pope Celestine in the year 432. Can you imagine what life was like in the year 432? You know, simple, down and dirty, gritty. Imagine the boats they were using to cross the Irish Sea and then the Channel over to France. It's hard to imagine. It's hard to imagine how rough living was in those years. Because the Pope had named him a bishop, he returned and with a few followers was one of the earliest Christian missionaries in Ireland. As history shows, Ireland became the first territory never ruled by the Romans to convert to Christianity. The Irish were stubborn. They were entrenched in their own traditions. Patrick set up a bishop's official seat, known as a see. I'm sure a lot of you are recovering Catholics. The largest population of every congregation I have served has consisted of recovering Catholics or recovering papists, as some people call themselves. His first converted patron was a man named Deshu, later Saint Deshu, who made a gift of a large barn hall for a sanctuary that became the center of a church and monastery. It was Patrick's favorite retreat, and that's where he died many years later. He set up his seat at Armagh, that's in northwestern Ireland, probably Northern Ireland today, and organized the church into territories, encouraging men and women to become monks and nuns, although it's not clear if he became a monk himself. Some historians think he settled and built a school there because he was protected by a powerful king. Whatever the case, his many journeys began and ended in Armagh. Tradition attributes to him the greatest impact in Connaught and Ulster and considers him the most significant missionary in Ireland. He traveled about preaching and teaching, building small churches, schools, and monasteries. He is credited with throwing down some sort of idol in Leitrim, just as Moses did with the golden calf in the Old Testament. This story about throwing down the idol added to Patrick's fame. Apparently, slavery was never out of his thoughts, and he wrote letters protesting the practice. These were chaotic times, and slave traders and British raiders of all sorts invaded and supplied Ireland frequently. Dublin was described as having an infamous slave market. Among Patrick's missionary activities were the raising of native clergy, abolishing Druidism, idolatry, and sun worship. This will be a disappointment to those of us who are sun worshipers, into new earth traditions and so on, but that was what he did. He is popularly credited with driving the snakes out of Ireland and into the sea. And I have to laugh at this because scientists have shown that it's practically impossible that Ireland ever had snakes at all. New Zealand has no snakes, and New Zealand actually has a large Irish population that celebrates St. Patrick's Day. What is considered is modern scholars suggest that the snakes referred to the serpent symbolism of the Druids. They carved images of serpents on their stone markers. According to some, Patrick remained conscious of himself as an unlearned exile, a former slave, and a fugitive. So he did not forget his life experiences and the traumas he endured. He wrote that his salvation came when he learned to trust his God completely. The date of his death has been disputed for centuries, with more recent exploration and calculations indicating that he died on March 17th, the feast day. If you weren't raised Catholic, you don't know that a lot of the saints' days are their death days, and that's what his was, March 17th, 493 CE. His remains were apparently buried with those of St. Columba, who, despite the Columba, was a man, and St. Bridget, female, in Downpatrick, County Down, North Ireland. And you know something about St. Bridget. You've talked about her, haven't you? Yeah. Perhaps it is not so terribly surprising that thoughts of St. Patrick traveled from the old country into the new world and ultimately around the world with the immigrants who revered him. Unlike some patron saints, including Bridget and Columba, Patrick was an outsider and a man of humble origins. His lifelong struggle to survive political and religious turmoil parallels many passages in Irish history. So though not born of the sod, he eventually came to symbolize it as he cultivated the early Irish Catholic spirit. What does it mean to be a patron saint? Going back to Latin, we are looking at the root words for father and holy, even when it is a woman we are referencing, and arriving at an expression we understand to mean holy protector. More colloquially, we are referencing a person somewhat like an angel, as the guardian of a people, place, or a profession, who can be intercessor or intermediary, to whom people pray and whose shrines they travel and whose relics they venerate. Saints of the Catholic tradition and some other Christian denominations, especially patron saints, linger in the popular imagination because they were actual people. They are not fictive people. They are reminders that it is possible to rise above the earthbound life and to perform miracles of one sort or another. According to one reference source, there are dozens of patron saints. I'm sure you can name some of them. Would anyone like to name a patron saint of something? Saint Francis. What is he the saint of? Animals, birds. He's always in the garden, isn't he? With his hands out, waiting for birds. Yeah. Who's the patron saint of Wales? Does anyone know? Saint David. David is a very common name in Wales. Scotland, golf course named after him. St. Andrews. St. Andrew is the patron saint of Scotland. A university is named after him. St. Augustine, who is he the patron saint of? Or what is he the patron saint of? What's that? You mumbled, but they all heard it. The patron saint of Greece, usually thought of as Saint Nicholas. Saint Basil for Russia. Saint Basil's is the big cathedral right in the center of Moscow. Saint Christopher, what is he? Travelers, yes, and yet he's been demoted. I believe we had a conversation about that once upon a, and you may have been the one who answered when I said, what happened to Saint Christopher? Were you the one who said he went the way of Pluto?
No.
When the planet, this was years ago when we were meeting somewhere else, Pluto was demoted from planet status to something else. And Saint Christopher also, there was an attempt to demote him too. Saint Jude. Lost causes and difficulties, objections. Saint Anthony. Yes. Isn't it amazing that we know these things? Was anyone here ever named after a saint? Anyone? Linda?
Yeah, when I was born, they wanted to use the name Linda. There's no Saint Linda.
Yeah.
So I had a second name, which was Anne,
Mhm.
which was Mary's mother.
Yes. There is a well-known school in Brooklyn, St. Anne's, very famous preparatory school. Sure.
My middle name was Anne,
Uh-huh.
and I didn't know I was the same.
Yeah. We know you're a saint. We know this. My mother's name was Anne. Her mother's name was Elizabeth. Elizabeth, the cousin of Mary. Yeah. You know, a lot of these trends, my brother is named Paul. Saint Paul was the origin of that name. Many people in my family with that name, Paul, John, very common names in my family. There are 7 Annes in my family. There are a number of Elizabeths. It's very confusing. And I'm the only one who goes to church. So these names really meant nothing to those people. Is there such a thing as a UU saint? Not officially. Okay, Cheryl, it's on you now. When in doubt, pray to Cheryl. Not officially. Not even in the 16th and 17th centuries, when Unitarian and Universalist ideas were rising on the horizon in Europe, and their adherents were struggling to build their own identities to distinguish them from the Catholic Church and from assorted other Protestant groups. These separatist movements did not have the mechanisms or inclination toward naming saints. Surviving religious persecution itself was a tremendous feat. And let's keep in mind, this is a tradition that celebrates life before death. We don't really celebrate life after death. You might do that in your own heart, but as a tradition, we're focused on life before death. Just thinking of persecution calls to mind three heroic figures of the mid-16th century who lived and died as free thinkers of a new spirit and whose legacies have helped to shape our UU history. I will talk about these on the 26th after the service when I'm going to do an overview of some important moments in UU history. One of them was Miguel Servet, who was burned at the stake on the orders of John Calvin, formerly known as Jean Calvin. David Ferenc, known as Francis David, who was a Transylvanian minister who converted from Catholicism to Lutheranism to Calvinism, and then launched Unitarian churches. As I said, you tried the rest and chose the best. And he did this in Transylvania. And then King John Sigismund, who is the only Unitarian king in history. He signed the Edict of Torda on March 18th in 1568, promoting religious tolerance throughout his kingdom. More on that in 2 weeks. Unitarianism is indebted to the outspokenness of those three people among hundreds of others. And another thing to remember about Unitarian Universalism as we celebrate life before death is that we are asked to live our faith, not to die for it. We're asked to live it, to focus on the time we have. It is difficult to imagine Unitarians today proclaiming sainthood for one or even a few of us, although Cheryl made it into the book. Ours is a relentless. Okay, Cheryl.
Under her mask.
Yeah. Having a good service, Cheryl. Yeah.
Having a good service.
Yeah. Ours is a relentlessly rational, democratic, and humanist flavored faith. We believe that each of us is capable of goodness and contributing to building a just world. But unlike others, we tend to shy away from doing things in the name of God. Think about that. We do that in ways to the few others who have come out of the Judeo-Christian past. Because we do not teach a narrowly defined theology, we do not live with thoughts of imminent martyrdom in our psyches, which is a great relief, I must say. We are fond of famous and gifted folk who self-identify as Unitarians or Universalists, but we don't think of them as spiritual superstars. We tend to think of Unitarian Universalists as examples, not as exceptions to the human condition. You may disagree, but when Pope John Paul was being considered for canonization, it was impossible to imagine Ralph Waldo Emerson being named Saint Waldo, or the president of the UUA being named a saint. I would say that Paul Newman came very close to sainthood. He's one of the most famous Unitarian Universalists in our history in the 20th century. Created, a camp, the Hole in the Wall Gang camp for children suffering from cancer that my nephew went to, raised millions, hundreds of millions of dollars through his food businesses, all of it donated to charity. He was an incredibly social justice oriented man. So ours is a faith full of what I call lowercase saints. And that's what it takes in the world we live in to get the job done. When St. Patrick's Day comes around on Friday, let's remember the man who was both slave and servant before he attained sainthood. It was as a servant of faith, in the faith of his time, that he did his best work. We can do that today in our own tradition, in our own ways. We can mean it metaphorically when we say, "Oh, you're such a saint." Have you ever said that to someone? I have. Yeah. When someone.
Another one.
Another one? Who's that?
Another thing.
Another saint. Okay. When you say that, you are acknowledging that you have done something lovely and loving. We can own the goodness, or what I call the godness inside us. We can be lowercase saints with lowercase gods, the gods or values of our independent imaginations and experiences. May it be so. If anyone would like to offer a compliment and then a second compliment, my brother's clapping for me. Okay, I'll keep you. I'll keep you. Okay, any complaints? Does anybody know something that I don't know about St. Patrick that you'd like to share? Have you been to St. Patrick's Cathedral? Yes. Have you been to the old St. Patrick's Cathedral, which is further down? Yes, that is a really interesting building. Yes, yes, yes.
St. Patrick's Mountain.
St. Patrick's Mountain, where is that?
It's in the Republic of Ireland, somewhere near the coast.
Uh-huh.
It's a mountain that is called Patrick,
Yeah,
and it's a very famous place for pilgrimages. People in the culture.
yeah, up to the top, on your knees?
Some of them, I imagine. I didn't do that.
Yeah. Did you go up the mountain?
Until the path stopped.
Yeah. Yeah, that was good. That was enough. Yeah.
But yeah, it's interesting because there are a lot of statues and shrines and things to Patrick in that part of Ireland.
That's right. Yeah. How many of you have been to Ireland? If you haven't been, would you like to go?
Yes. Yeah.
Yes, it is one of the greenest places on earth. It's absolutely stunning. So I'm wearing green today, you know. It's one of the few places I've ever seen multiple rainbows going across the sky at the same time. Really amazing. And in that respect, it is a lot like New Zealand. The color, the music, the rainbows, the rain. I went there to be there for a week, and I ended up being there for 4 weeks, traveling around the entire country on a motorcycle in the rain. Yes, not a trip I will soon forget. Any complaints anybody would like to make? Was it too much information?
No, never.
Perfect.
Did you know this story before?
No.
Yes. Well, I'm glad I shared it with you today. I was going to talk about something else. On the 26th, I'm going to talk about inaugural poets and the presidency and what that's all about. In the meantime, I'm not going to forget it for a change. We are going to take the offering. Now let there be an offering to sustain and strengthen this place, which is sacred to so many of us, a community of memory and of hope, for we are now the keepers of the dreams here. I don't know who's passing the baskets. Irene, would you like to say something about the first collection, the second collection?
The second collection this month is for Wrangle Brook Community Garden.
Linda, is that the last music?
Yes.
Okay. Well, then we are now going to extinguish the chalice. Pat, would you like to come up and extinguish it? Seeing as you're from the old sod. We extinguish the chalice here that it might glow gently in our hearts. May it light your path as you leave this place. May it guide your way until we are together again. I want to read an Irish blessing before we get into our closing circle. May the blessing of light be on you, light without and light within. May the blessed sunlight shine on you and warm your heart until it grows like a great peat fire. If you haven't seen the film, The Banshees of Inisherin, it would be the perfect film to see this week because it's all about a very small Irish community. Let's form our closing circle now.
Go now in peace, go now in peace. And I know spirit
You go forth today. May you be led by faith, whatever your faith is, and not by fear. May you remember to extend yourselves in love to those who cross your path. May you remember to always walk gently on the earth, this garden planet that carries each of us alone and all of us together across the sky. Go in peace to bring more love and justice into the world. Amen.
Thank you, Julie. Very good. Thank you. There was a lot. There was a lot. Yes.